Hello, this is Old News. My name's David.
And I'm Russell. It's good to be back. This will be episode 20.
Yeah. To be honest, we're just trying to catch up with the Last Tuesday project. Because they're on a monthly schedule and we're supposed to be on a fortnightly schedule. Yet they have as many episodes as us, if not more, if you count their mini-sodes.
And we noticed...
Doing well there, lads!
But I noticed that, we saw the figures earlier today, didn't we, that our downloads have gone down slightly, probably because of the disruption in our schedule. So it's good to have you back if you are here. I must say thank you to new listener Alex, who got in touch. He listened to the last episode, which was the episode on... The Millennium Bug, and he really enjoyed it. So, and then because we trailed this one, and he pointed me in the direction of a documentary worth watching on YouTube. So thank you for that, and that was good primer and reminder for things this morning. So yeah, excellent. And what's new with you?
I got snowed in on Wednesday. Nearly got stuck in my car on the way home on Tuesday night because I made a poor decision pulling off the A1 early and got trapped on the side streets.
And despite it's beginning to warm up now and the snow is beginning to thaw, you got stuck in the snow twice today.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Luckily one was near your house, but the first one, I didn't know what I was going to do until that guy turned up with his Land Rover.
So we need to express our thanks to Anonymous Man in Land Rover.
Yeah, Anonymous Man in white Land Rover Discovery.
Well done if you're a listener.
Who must live somewhere in your neck of the woods because he's on the way up to
Baldridge. Yeah, presumably. Yeah.
Henny, it's Old News, man.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, go to our website www.oldnews.podbean.com, or you can email us oldnews@gmail.com. You can visit us on Facebook, just search for Old News Podcast, or connect to us through Twitter @oldnewspod. We're also on YouTube. This week's beer of indeterminate strength.
Oh yes, we're unseasonably drinking Christmas beer.
Yeah, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Terrible punning.
that was going to be the whole aim. Everything was going to have a terrible pun.
But isn't that kind of the stock and trade of the real ale business anyway? Is just terrible puns. Wasn't there a Christmas beer at one point called Merry Christmas?
I think so, which actually had myrrh in it.
It was flavoured with myrrh. Did you ever try it?
I think I did. It was disgusting.
Yeah, it had I don't think it tasted of anything much, but it had a sort of a perfume of, myrrh, I guess. Yeah. I think it's probably the one and the only time I've ever smelled myrrh.
Yeah, in a beer.
Yeah. I've smelled frankincense before. Mm-hmm. Do you remember Mum and Dad had a small sample of frankincense that somebody had brought as a gift from, presumably the Holy Land, I guess.
I would guess. Yeah.
I wonder if there's still much production of it.
Almost certainly is. I mean, it must get used a lot in the Coptic church and that kind of thing.
You think it's still used for like embalming and things? Do you think that's still a thing?
Is there a difference between frankincense and just incense?
Oh, I don't know. Does frankincense form part of incense? I really don't know. I've no idea.
Something to look up.
Incense, do you burn it or do you just heat it?
Can't you do both? Don't you set it away smouldering under certain circumstances?
Is it like I don't know if incense is like a solid or is it like an oil that you heat up in a lamp or whatever? I know nothing about smoke on a rope.
Yeah,
there we are.
That's really nothing.
Anybody who's a member of the Catholic or Orthodox churches?
Or just knows about incense. You spend a lot of time in those sort of crystal shops where you buy dream catchers and
joss sticks and things. Yeah, I've always found that a strange idea. You'd have like a holy smell. I know it seems very at odds to the rest, like especially in Christianity, seems like very at odds with the rest of the theology. I don't know.
To me, it seems like a hangover from pre-Christian religions.
Well, presumably, yeah. I mean, perfumes and that. Yeah, incense is long-standing, isn't it? Probably exists in all religions. And I guess it has a relationship with fire as well. Presumably burning something that's making an unusual perfume type smell, that's kind of miraculous in a way, isn't it? Might be seen as holy or pure. Oh, well, that's a curious thought to begin the podcast on. Religious guesswork. Theological guesswork.
From beer to theology. in 7 steps.
I know a guy who is like a philosopher, theologist, so I should probably just ask him.
Old News.
Okay, should we move on to today's subject?
Yes, so as previously trailed, both in person and in the last episode, we're going to be talking about Ben Johnson, the 1988 Olympics. We always put a date on things, so the 100 metres final for the men happened on the 24th of September 1988. And the Seoul Olympics, the Summer Olympics, obviously. These were kind of the first Olympics I really remember. I was watching some of the clips of the, obviously the race itself and some of the things that happened. But I remember, there was like the kind of swirl type logo they had, and there was a lot of stuff just sort of came back to me. Probably one of the first Olympics I ever really watched. What is strange is how late in the year it is. 24th of September.
Oh yeah, that is quite late.
Yeah, and I wonder why that was. Any ideas?
Is it because it's hot in Korea earlier in the year?
I mean, the heat hasn't usually put them off Summer Olympics, but presumably there was a reason for it. Yeah, I mean, do you remember much of watching those Olympics? Or
I don't really. I remember it being on, and I remember watching the opening ceremony. I remember talking about the Ben Johnson thing at school after it happened, but I don't really remember anything else about it.
You've been a little bit older than me. Do you remember the LA Olympics?
I do remember the LA Olympics. Again, I can't remember anything about it. I remember it being on.
Do you remember
being aware of it?
The men in jetpacks in the opening ceremony? That was sort of very famous.
Yeah, I remember the men with the jetpacks. Yeah.
This being a sport issue, I mean, we're neither of us are particularly sporty people, and I thought it'd be worth talking just a little bit about like the very early origins of this podcast, because this started as a joke between me and a friend in the pub. And my friend is very into sports. Hello, Ian, if you're listening. And he suggested because we were talking about being able to bluff our way the subject, and I was saying that obviously, like not being into football, for example, but I work with a lot of guys who are, and so I have to at least be able to make conversation, and it's quite the art, just as a social grace. And this was this joke that, well, if let's do a podcast, it would be like an hour long, and it would always be on a sport theme, and it would be up to me to be able to bluff my way
through the
subject. I could probably bluff my way through football for an hour, whatever's going on, I suppose. It doesn't take much to catch up on who is where in the table and whatever. But I think this subject brings an awful lot of other issues out. We don't need to concentrate so much on athletics or sprinting as a particular sport.
Oh news, oh news, oh news, oh news, oh news, oh news.
The actual race itself, did we watch this live?
I don't remember watching it live.
I remember seeing it, but given the time difference between the two, if I remember rightly, a lot of the broadcasting was done on sort of relay, so it would have been broadcast live in the middle of the night, but then repeated during the day in the UK. So I think I might have seen this certainly on the day it happened, but it mightn't have been live. It would probably be later that day, and it would have been the next day. Of course, he breaks his own record, 9.79 seconds, which was the world record, just for a moment. So should we talk a little bit about Ben Johnson himself and just like establish the story a little bit? You've got a little bit about where, like his origins, where he came from.
So who is Ben Johnson? He was born in Jamaica, emigrated to Canada in 1976.
He was 15 at the time, so a teenager.
He hasn't gone to Canada just for the sprinting, I don't think.
No, he's taken there by his family, by his mother,
Skip forward in time, his first sort of international success in sprinting was at the Commonwealth Games in 1982, where he got 2 silver medals.
All right, yeah. And that's like a common route for, I suppose, Canadian athletes do well at the Commonwealth Games, perhaps, before you make an impression.
In the following year, at the World Championships, he came 6th in his semi-final.
Okay.
So having done pretty well at the Commonwealth Games, once faced with a world of runners rather than just...
Yeah, and the Americans in particular, I suppose, the big people to beat, right?
He didn't obviously better than me, for example. But
he's sort of being introduced to the world of professional running, and he sort of comes in contact with his coach, a guy called Charlie Francis, and he's a bit of a key figure here. He was a successful Canadian athlete who'd given up like a business career to then take up the coaching, for the love of the coaching.
Right.
And his sort of thinking was that there'd been actually quite a lot of Jamaicans had moved from the Caribbean to Canada, like Toronto area, in that era, sort of the mid-70s into the 80s. And Jamaica in the Caribbean has a very strong tradition of sprinting. Sprinting's their thing. It's sort of along with cricket, it's kind of their sport. The same way that Finland has javelin.
Right.
It's just like that one bit of the world, the Nordic countries, but Finland in particular, like javelin's their thing. Sprinting's very much the sport in the Caribbean, and Jamaica in particular. So he put together this team of runners and was developing them. And then at one point they come across to Europe, to one of the race meets in Europe, and they don't do very well. This is all very well worn in the media, so anybody can go watch a documentary on YouTube like I did, or whatever, and you can find this out. They come across the East Germans, who were quite dominant in like track and field, or very successful given that they're a country of 14 million people. I think they were very successful at swimming as well as the track and field. And this was because they had a drug program.
Yep, state-sponsored drug program.
State-sponsored drug program. No, this was commonly known. Nobody was saying anything about it. The East Germans kept passing their drugs tests, so nothing had been proven. When they got back to Canada, having not done very well in Europe, this was a decision. The coach said, do you want to keep going as we are, or do we want to win? And obviously the decision was made, right, we're going to start this drug program. And at first that it's not quite as optimal, and then they get like the second sort of key figure in there, or the third key figure I guess, is Dr. George Astafom, who I think is known as Jamie commonly, and he's the doctor that sort of administers the drug program from that point on, the steroids. And he actually introduces like new drugs in. So one of them is like, it's an agricultural drug for bulking up the meat in cows and things before they slaughter.
Ugh.
It's all very strange. I wonder what motivates people. I can understand what motivates Johnson. He wants to win. He wants to win badly. This is not to excuse that behaviour, but I understand the motivation. I understand the coach as well, because he wants to win.
Yeah.
He wants his athletes to be successul. The doctors, on the other hand...
What motivates the doctor to look for unusual drugs? Yeah. Other
than some sort of vicarious pleasure in helping somebody win and beat the system and
make money, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose make money. I guess perhaps this is a curious thing. They just seem evil in this. That makes sense. They're lurking in the background. Everybody remembers the fellow up front, but actually this is a bit of a team effort in this sort of cheating. So yeah, we've got this lead up, and then the beginning of 1998 doesn't go very well because he has a hamstring injury. So then he comes back. He still is a bit hampered with the injury, and there's a race meet in Zurich. I think it's like the last event before the Olympics, sort of seen as the Olympic warm-up event of that particular year. And he comes third, and so there's a bit of a panic. And up till now, the game they've been playing, bear in mind, he took the World Championship in 1987 and broke the record in 1987. So he's doing quite well otherwise. But after there's this Zurich panic, and so the game they've been playing is to take the drugs in 3-week cycles, whatever it is, and then stop before the event, and then allow enough time to elapse so that when you get tested at the events, you don't get caught. And of course, what he does is he takes it for a little bit too long and too close up until the start of the Olympics.
So it's not all out of his system.
Yeah, so the seeds of his downfall are sown in obviously he's taking drugs as a regular thing anyway, but the seeds are sown in those last few months. So we have the race itself, and I've got the running order of positions. The winner is Johnson with a world record. You can watch the footage, and I do remember seeing the photo of, as he knows he's ahead, he knows he's streets ahead of everybody else, and before he actually crosses the line, he raises his hand in the air with the finger pointing, I'm number one, look at me, because he's beating the great rival, of course, was Carl Lewis of the USA, who takes silver, and third is Clifford Christie. So we've got Canada, USA, United Kingdom, and then just for the sake of completeness, in fourth, Calvin Smith, Dennis Mitchell, Robinson de la Silva, who's Brazil, Desai Williams, Canada, and Ray Stewart, who's Jamaica. So all the traditional Western nations and Caribbean nations there, for those types of events. Yeah. And probably all competitors who are either African American or of Caribbean origin. That cultural sort of thing is there, sort of sprinting in those communities. Out of curiosity, of those 8, do you know how many were caught for drugs at any point in their career? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Out of those 8 finalists, 5 of them, Johnson's the first to get caught in that race. The later date, both Lewis and Christie, who are big names, end up in trouble for various things, which like bans and whatever, and also the lesser known names Mitchell and Williams for USA and Canada respectively. They both have problems where they get caught for drugs at later dates. So we were talking earlier about, you know, there's a bit of a legal aspect to this. You know, we can't make accusations to say so and so is a cheat or so and so took drugs or whatever, but we can certainly say in those 5 cases, and I think it would be very safe to say athletics has a problem.
Yeah, certainly did then. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Russian team at the moment, all the problems Russia are having.
Exactly. Yeah, and you just think, this is nothing new. You know, like historically we've got problems of people like in the 1900s there was like cyclists using heroin and things,
cocaine,
you know,
and stuff.
cocaine just to overcome pain. And I mean, we'll get on to like the kind of the general point what sport is for, I suppose, later. It seems to me there'd been a lot of talk about Johnson having had this like step change in ability.
Yeah.
From his like sort of debut to all of a sudden becoming successful, and there was a lot of whispering around the edges.
Yeah, I mean, it was seen as sour grapes from Lewis after the race, but he said that there was people coming out of nowhere and that there was gold medalists at this competition who were obviously on drugs and stuff like that. But there was whistleblowers beforehand as well. In 1986, Mike Dwyer, I think I'm pronounced that right, another Canadian sprinter, voiced concerns that drugs were epidemic in the Canadian team, especially from the people from the Toronto area.
Okay.
So there was
training under that one guy. Yeah. So he's sort of making the allegation at that team without naming them as such.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, is the whole thing that he had this rivalry with Carl Lewis. Carl Lewis beat him 8 times in a row, and then all of a sudden Ben Johnson comes along and starts breaking world records.
Yeah. And beat Carl Lewis continuously for a period of 3 years. Yeah. I think what's interesting is this kind of step change in performance that leads to suspicions. This foreshadows some of the things we'll talk about later on.
Yeah.
But it becomes a common theme. There are some people pointing the finger. The problem is that like they're maybe like minor figures, and they're easily dismissed, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, you're not a winner, though. Like sour grapes, right?
Yeah.
And, of course, the reality is that they're speaking out probably because they're working hard and not getting...
Yeah, not getting anywhere.
It also says to me that there's a bit of a conspiracy of silence. Interesting in that documentary, the BBC documentary, it's called Reputations, if you want to look it up. There's a Canadian journalist, a sports journalist, saying that they wanted to go along with the myth. The story, It was a fairy tale. It was a great story for Canada. They didn't want to believe the whispering on the edges. It all sounds so familiar with stories we've had more recently. It sort of leads us into what happens next, because 3 days later he's disqualified, right? Just totally as an aside, very famous BBC sports presenter at the time, Des Lynam, who's a real sort of fixture. He was on the TV and he's handed a piece of paper and he says, "I've just been handed a piece of paper and what's on it, and if it's true, is, quote, the most dramatic story out of the Olympics, or perhaps any others." Well, if it's not in poor taste, I think the story from Munich may have perhaps been a little more dramatic.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah,
perhaps. But certainly in terms of sporting story, sports news story, it probably was. It was wall-to-wall press coverage. There's some excellent footage of Johnson, who he gets expelled from the games and he goes home that day, I think. Just the enormous pack of press at the airport, whatever. It's just unreal. You know, like huge scrum and huge amount of minders around him and like jostling or whatever. This was big news.
Yeah. Did you read about the thing one of his teammates did out of his bedroom window at the Olympic Village?
Oh no!
Put a sheet outside that said from 0 to 0 in 9.79 seconds.
Right. You wonder if that team member knew. Well, I suppose in some way they may not have known. They just maybe just felt really hurt.
Yeah, well, you'd feel let down, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and even at this distance, I still think a lot of the people at the time do feel hurt and disappointed and angry, because it's your teammates and you're there.
Yeah.
Obviously, as outsiders, particularly the Olympics, we see them as national representatives. But I think for a lot of athletes, that's quite secondary to...
Yeah, them doing well, their personal bests and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they just want to win. And that says something, I think says something that speaks to the character of Ben Johnson himself, who isn't a terribly sympathetic person when you see him interviewed. You know, he just comes across as slightly unfriendly. He's a bit of a peculiar character.
Old news.
Canada is obviously thrown into turmoil in terms of its sporting politics and, you know, all the people that administer Olympic sport and athletics. And so they have a thing called the Dublin Inquiry. Dublin is the fellow who is chairing the inquiry, and this is all brought out into the open. Up until the inquiry, Ben Johnson denied everything.
Yes.
And so this has gone from being caught to lying. He lies. He says, I'm clean. And then he says, oh, well, I didn't knowingly take anything. Putting the blame onto the doctor, right?
One of the things was that he'd been given he'd had some beer so that he could urinate, and that he thought someone had put the drug in the beer.
Right.
Was one of the things he came out with.
Twisting in the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah. The inquiry does two things. One, the doctor, Astafom, he comes and he spills his gut, and it turns out, despite the fact that he's been kind of the confidant and taking over the role of the coach in some ways, he's also been recording telephone conversations with Johnson.
Right.
And tape recordings of meetings in offices whenever it all comes out in the inquiry. So the doctor goes, well, if I'm going down, I'm going to throw everybody under the bus, including Johnson. So Johnson's lies are exposed. Then he testifies late in the inquiry, or last. He's just forced to admit, yes, that's what I did.
The doctor even said that he'd been taking drugs since 1981.
So kind of from the very early days of his career.
Yeah.
It's so sad, isn't it, for somebody who was obviously so naturally talented and had the focus. Maybe he just didn't quite have the talent, though. I don't know, to me there's just this question mark. All of the records from that era in the 80s, until the reforms come in post Johnson,
they're all questionable, aren't they?
Yeah, maybe we need to be looking down at the 5th, 6th and 7th places to find people who perhaps are actually the real stars, and they're all forgotten. I find that quite tragic in a way.
I wonder at what point someone will come forward and say, yeah, in such and such Olympics I was taking drugs. I wonder if any of them will come out and say, you know, any gold winners in anything, whether it's swimming or hammer or any of the sports.
Yeah, marathon or whatever, perhaps. Yeah.
If, you know, in 2025, will some now aging athlete come forward and say, yeah, actually, I got this gold medal, but I shouldn't have? And will some floodgates open?
But it's been a long time now. It's been 25 years, and we still
haven't had anyone come
30
forward.
years, and we still don't have it. And maybe that says something about people who just want to win. That focus is still there, isn't it? Like, so Johnson's tune changes after he's forced to admit the lie and admit that he cheated. His tune since has been, well, I still ran that fast that day. The only crime I committed was I got caught.
Yeah, that's not really the crime, though, is it? You wouldn't say, oh, I murdered that person. But the only crime I committed was getting caught. Yeah. He then changed his tune again and said, oh, there's sort of conspiracy to get me. That they were going to test me, not anybody else. Because apparently in the World Championships in 87, when he gets the record, he claims there was a mysterious person in the drug testing room who wasn't part of the drug testing team and all this business, right? So he's saying there's a conspiracy, right? And I don't buy anything Johnson has to say at this point. But maybe there is a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy of people who are worried about what's happening. Yeah.
The whistleblowers on the edges. There's probably people in the science community that support all of this, know what's going on, but know that their testing regime doesn't really make sense.
So they want to try and catch someone so they can, you know, so they've got evidence to say, right, we need to change things.
OLD NEWS. Old news.
The next point I wanted to move on, because look at the news aspect of this, is like the Canadian response. Once he gets the World Championship in 87, he's a big star. He was gone from being a rising star to being one of Canada's most bankable sports stars outside of hockey, ice hockey, depending who you are. I just had this argument with a Canadian just recently. If you call it ice hockey, you're clearly an outsider.
Yeah, but it's not though. Hockey's played with a ball.
Yeah, but they would call that field hockey.
Well, they're wrong, aren't they?
Yeah, they are clearly wrong.
Because it was obviously invented with a ball first.
That just makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so he's a big star. He has a huge amount of fame. He's commanding big fees for, cutting ribbons on supermarket openings and all of this. He's sponsorship deals and the rest. Part of this, I hadn't really thought about this before. He represented part of Canadian identity as distinctly from American identity, because and this is to do with race relations. And I don't set myself up as an expert on race relations in the North Americas. Canada's race relations are very different. It tends to be less, although those communities have issues, it's much less conflicted than obviously the history of the Civil War and slavery and so on in the US, because Canada was the place that slaves fled to.
Yeah.
And so you've got that history that the Canadians hold very dear, and rightly so, I would say. You've also got sort of Trudeau's vision of a modern Canada, that Canada would be diverse but united as Canadians. Obviously these African or Caribbean communities had arrived in the 70s, and it was the hope that they would be Canadians, they would integrate, they would be Canadian, Canada would be united behind a figure like Johnson. He provides like a figurehead for that sort of vision of Canada's future, or present, I suppose, at that point. And of course he portrays it in the Canadian press. I mean, there was a very famous cartoon. I found the cartoon, but I can't find its source. I think it's from one of the Montreal newspapers, and it's in 3 panels describing a cartoon on the air.
Yeah, I can imagine where this is going
on the internet. And there's 3 captions. One is Canadian wins gold. 2, Jamaican Canadian fails drugs test. 3, Jamaican loses gold medal.
Yeah.
And it says something about how quickly a lot of Canadians felt they wanted to drop him. They were so embarrassed and so ashamed and so angry. And and obviously this Jamaican Canadian wasn't a thing beforehand. He's Canadian. Yeah. But now he's Jamaican Canadian, and that speaks to like some of the racial tensions in Canada, and the level to which integration really goes. And by the way, although we're talking about Canada, the log in my own eye, we have our own issues in the UK, of course. There's a headline from the Ottawa Citizen newspaper, quotes, "Thanks a lot, you bastard."
Oh, crumbs.
On the front
That's
page.
harsh.
On the front page of like a major newspaper. I can really feel for the Canadians at that point.
Old News is available on iTunes, Pocket Casts, Player FM, the Apple Podcast app, and all your favourite podcast apps. We're also on TuneIn Radio, and Amazon's Alexa and Google's Assistant can play us just by asking. Technology, yeah?
Right, so that leads us nicely into, I've got a kind of parallels with section here. And the first one is Dwayne Chambers, who was slightly lesser known, but a successful sprinter in the UK. And did he hold the European record or won gold at the European Championships? A talented man, and then was caught taking another thing called THG. The drug that Johnson used was Danzanol, and THG was a performance enhancing drug. So he's caught, but not only is he caught, and what always made me very angry with Dwayne Chambers in particular was that he was part of the 4x4 relay.
Yeah, and that was one of our few gold medals.
It isn't the Olympics where
the Olympics.
Chambers is caught. It's the Europeans.
Oh, right, okay.
So we've won gold or silver in the Europeans, and all the other guys who are clean, lose their medals.
Yeah,
these are. Obviously it's a national embarrassment. It's not on the scale of Johnson. It's not as public. Doesn't have the whole imagination of the country behind him. But those 3 guys.
Yeah, I think everybody felt for those 3 guys.
There was an enormous amount of sympathy for them.
Yeah. And there was a lot of anger against Chambers. And
there was a huge amount of schadenfreude, wasn't there, when Chambers made an appearance on a reality TV show a number of years later. I can't remember, was it a cooking show or something? And he just imploded. He just publicly imploded and had a meltdown on national telly. And everybody went, well, sucks to be you. Nobody cared. It's like, I remember reading a thing in the press, it was just like, well, you screwed those guys over publicly in the name of British sport. Screw you, you don't get a second chance, or you blew it. Interestingly, Dwayne Chambers had this thing of the leap-in performance. And I remember when that came out, a friend of ours, Richard, talked, because he's into sport and into following the athletics. I remember him saying about how he'd grown in a muscular way.
All right.
As a sports fan, he just noticed, and then like post fact when it came out, he kind of went, oh yeah, there was. You could see this step change in his performance. Just to finish the Johnson story, I've got a little bit about his career subsequently.
Right, yeah.
Right. It's generally bizarre. He acts for a little while as a coach to a chap called Al-Sad Gaddafi, who's the son of Gaddafi, like Colonel Gaddafi,
right.
who was an aspiring footballer.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and so they employed Johnson as a coach to get him to fitness to improve his performance on the national team or whatever. It's all very obviously just weird. So this is the kind of people he's in league with. He was then racing in Japan, racing horses and turtles and other things.
Racing turtles?
Yeah. So
turtles or tortoises?
Turtles. So presumably this was for like Japanese TV. Now I think there was like by all accounts a bit of a charity element to this. Okay. But presumably they had a running track and like a water track next to it, and they prodded a turtle up its bum or something. It's just very peculiar.
He did actually have a running comeback,
Yes, he did. He had the running comeback because he got a 2-year ban initially, and then proceeds to
got on the Canadian Olympic team for Barcelona in '92,
right?
But flopped. He stumbled out of the blocks and didn't come anywhere, didn't place anywhere.
Right. And then, subsequently, got caught for drugs again. Here we have the measure of the man. I find that very sad. I find that very tragic for him. Because maybe I could forgive a young man, badly advised, very focused, very, with an ego the size of Texas or whatever. Well, perhaps
Ontario.
Saskatchewan. Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. It's supposed to be people do. And so maybe he had a chance for redemption.
Yeah. Even if he'd come back and, not placed anywhere, or came 4th or 5th or something, but did it cleanly.
Yeah.
Yeah, people would have gone, well, good on you. Well,
Yeah. Yeah, you had your day in the sun, but at least you've paid your penance and you came and fought honourably. And the chance was missed.
It's old news.
So we've talked about drugs historically, drugs in the Johnson case, the Dwayne Chambers case. Obviously, we can't talk about drugs in sport without mentioning Lance Armstrong, right, in cycling. Again, Armstrong has a thing. I can't remember the name of the journalist. He's a really prize-winning journalist now because of his work on the Armstrong case. Was it the Sunday Telegraph he worked for?
I think so.
I think it was, wasn't it? So the Telegraph deserve a lot of praise, I think, because they stuck to their guns when they knew there was a thing. Whereas a lot of other media were buying into the mythos. And I remember seeing an interview with him, the journalist, and he had interviewed Lance Armstrong in his early career. He was doing well, but he'd sort of peaked.
Yeah.
And as a professional sports journalist in cycling, he just had this impression that he was a moderate to good cyclist, but just had reached his peak. He wasn't really going to get anywhere. And then suddenly, a step change in performance.
Yeah.
Of course, what happens when that eventually gets exploded is not only does it destroy Lance Armstrong, who's this great inspirational figure, but it damages cycling, and it just blows the lid off cycling.
Yeah.
In a big way.
And it's still not properly recovered. I mean, there's still just the all suspect all the time.
Yeah, and the recent allegations of what went on with Team Sky and this package that got delivered, whatever, there's a whole news story about that sort of went on last year, I think. Yeah, there's this smell, isn't there? There's this smell that hovers over the rotting corpse of professional cycling. And here's the thing, right? In cycling in particular, things like the Tour de France, but let's just think about things like the 100 metres in the Olympics. Are the things we're asking people to do inhuman?
I think to expect people to constantly break records in the 100 metres is ridiculous. We're expecting humans to get better at doing that thing year on year.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to happen.
That can't possibly be the case.
Cycling, like the Tour, I think it possibly is inhuman. How you can do that without drugs or the other kinds of artificial help they have.
Yeah.
You've either got to be an absolute machine or you're going to fail. Do you know much about it? Do you know much about the tour and how it works?
Not
it's just constant. They don't stop. They don't have any breaks of any reasonable length at all.
Right.
And they're up and down the mountains, and it's insanity how a person can put their body through that.
And here's the thing, right? So we've got records that have been set in the Tour de France maybe 5-10 years ago, on each individual section and the whole tour itself and whatever. Well, given the state of, what happens, what is exposed under Armstrong, but also the state of athletics 20, 30 years ago, who says that all of those records aren't sus in some way?
Yeah.
And now they're expecting clean athletes to meet those targets?
Yeah. I've asked a few people who are into cycling. They're not cyclists, but they're
spectators, they're fans.
They're fans. Yeah. I've asked them, because the tour has been going on essentially since bicycles were invented. Obviously, back in 1902, bikes were significantly heavier, really significantly heavier.
Oh yeah.
They didn't have any kind of suspension or that kind of thing. The tour can't possibly have been the same.
No,
it can't possibly have been the same event as it is now, because there was no way. And I've never had a sensible answer back from any of them to explain to me, as someone who doesn't really know much about this. As the bikes have become more technologically advanced and people have become able to be professional cyclists, whereas, in 1902, you were probably a gentleman cyclist.
Yeah, a man of leisure sort of thing, yeah.
You probably also, you had a monoplane out the back and,
and the valet who dressed you in the morning.
Yeah. They wouldn't have had the training regimes and the science behind it that we have now.
So the demands have got to have increased.
They have to have.
Over time.
They must have. And have we taken it to a
because
level?
that's got to be the response, hasn't it? That once everybody can do this thing easily, because technology's improved, training's improved, professionalism has come in,
we make it a little bit more
a bit harder. Yeah, so we get, instead of nobody fails to complete the tour, 10% of the field fails to complete, or 50% of the field from the start. That progression is natural. It just plays into human frailty. If the demands we're making on people is inhuman, and cheating's the only way to get through or to win, we're just opening the door. Is sport about getting over the line, or is it some other test of character? Is it a moral test? Are we expecting them to be more perfect than us? Because who hasn't looked over because see, this is Johnson's point. Who hasn't looked over the shoulder of your mate having a test in school, or the spelling test or whatever it was,
and cheated a bit?
Who hasn't cheated a little bit in their lives?
Yeah,
I know it just seems weird that we're expecting them to be on a higher moral plane, and then we're opening the door to cheating, and then
asking them to do too much.
Really surprised that it happens.
Yeah,
which says to me, because we get this cat and mouse game, particularly on drugs. New drugs come in, they can't test for them, then they do test for them, and somebody gets caught, and this cycle happens. The drugs are changing all the time. The Dwayne Chambers case, the THG thing was just you. They would argue now, the anti-doping people would say, we have a much more proactive thing. That these are all the reforms that came in after the Johnson case. But even so, it goes on. People still keep getting caught, as per the Russians we mentioned earlier on.
Old news!
Here's my question, why not just legalise the lot?
Well, the argument would be that you're then disproportionately disadvantaging poorer countries and poorer athletes.
That is already true in terms of medical care, training and facilities. So what's different? Surely we can just eliminate this and just say, people do themselves terrible damage as professional sports people anyway.
Yeah.
So why don't we just say, you get over, it's an entertainment industry, let's not forget. So you get over that line. You get over that line as fast as you can, however you want. From an absolute point of view, I find that difficult to argue against. other than like it's encouraging people to potentially damage themselves in ways that are maybe more intrinsic. But what's the real difference between that and technology? Like we were talking about this thing with the swimming, isn't there? There's an excellent chart which I suggest people go dig out on the internet of the world records in, I think it's the 100 meters freestyle in the swimming, because that's kind of A1, the kind of the premier sprint in swimming. The records have improved, but there's a step change in the records each time.
Each time a new bit of technology is allowed.
Yeah, and the first one is the introduction of the tumble turn. So when they introduce the tumble turn at the end of the pool. The next one is, what is it, like the elimination of when they have the slopey edge of the pool. You get rid of the ripples like much more quickly, you get like a flatter surface. There's all these different things. You can see like there's 3 or 4 step changes. If you eliminate those changes on the average and just take them out and then look at the records, the 100 meters freestyle hasn't really improved that much.
No.
And that says that really
humans aren't getting better, people aren't getting better.
That backs up your earlier arguments.
Technology is getting better.
Yeah, and so why not the drugs? We could have rules about safety. We could say these drugs, you come to us with a new drug you want to use, so long as you can make a safety case to say that it's not going to destroy so-and-so's liver. Instead of having an anti-doping agency, just have a drugs approval agency. You can hear the heads of sports fans exploding around the world.
Yeah. How dare these people who know nothing about sport have opinions?
Yeah.
Go back to your technology and disasters.
But I like this, right? Because that's an interesting moral question, isn't it? Because I think then we get into this, that there is this sort of political arena, not political arena, but like, look at the Olympic ideal. And much as I'm not a sports person, I'm not a huge sports fan, I buy into the Olympic ideals.
Yeah, me too. I always think back to the original Olympics in Greece. They weren't,
they had a religious element to them.
They did, but it was about sending your best athletes to do the best in...
For the glory of Crete and Sparta and Athens and
wherever. Yeah. They would not have been into drugs.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know what all the different competitions were, but I bet there was ones that involved, javelin, discus.
Yeah, the old sports.
Were they... making the discuses more streamlined, and if you could get your discus smoother, was that cheating?
Polish your discus with beeswax or with whatever.
Oh, I've got this this oil from Azerbaijan. Look, it makes it even slippier.
But if you're against this sort of intervention, right, like drugs, then like I said this earlier before in the discussion we had pre the show, right? Why not just standardise technology? Everybody gets the same javelin. Everybody gets the same discus. Everybody gets the same bicycle.
Yeah.
Well,
the thing is, in some sports, that's true. Like in javelin, discus, they do get the same javelins and discuses, don't they? I believe.
I think you have your own javelin.
Do you?
It's not like your tennis racket. There's another one. Everybody should just get the same
tennis racket.
Different sizes, perhaps. We could.
Maybe different weights.
Yeah,
that kind of thing,
perhaps,
for different sizes.
Yeah,
people.
I sort of appreciate that, perhaps. But
I mean, the same bike, the same.
Yeah, I mean, there are standards. See, this is the thing, is that there's standards to be met, and the comparison you drew before was with Formula One.
Yes, when you're watching Formula One, you've got the driver, and it's a competition of their skill, but it's also a competition of the engine manufacturer and the car manufacturer.
But in principle, see, it's all about emphasis, isn't it? Because in principle, like, when you're designing a tennis racket or whether you're designing an F1 car, you've got a set of standards you probably have to work to.
Yeah.
I imagine javelins have to have a certain amount of weight in the front and a certain amount of weight at the back, and the grip has to be with it or whatever. That is probably the same for discus, hammer. And so we accept that there's some degree of limits, but there's variation within that.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go a different way there when you said it's a difference in emphasis, because to me, the emphasis in Formula One is
more
the teams.
Technology,
it's more
right?
The technology.
Yeah.
It's how have Mercedes improved this year? Are Ferrari going to catch up with Mercedes?
See what I
are
find
McLaren going to do anything other than just fail completely and be awful?
Well, right, so that's always right. So what I find totally arbitrary in this is there was the swimsuits in the swimming which had like the shark skin thing, right? And there was like the all-over swimsuits which had better frictional resistance against the water. I should know all about that. Anyway, they had better skin friction, and they got banned. And I find that arbitrary. It's like they're not like extending their hands, or they're not paddling, and they're not bringing an oar with them, or flippers, or like an outboard motor or whatever. It's just.
But this is where it comes back to. Well, either everyone has that, or everyone doesn't.
But we've allowed these technology changes in the swimming in the past.
Yeah.
So why?
What was wrong with that technology?
Exactly, because ultimately everybody would have had it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was a technology developed by, presumably by like Speedo or something, their kind of textile technology. Other rival companies, like presumably
would quickly
swimwear firms would come up with something similar.
Yeah.
Because it's a natural thing. They're just looking at shark skin and how that works. Why ban that and not anything else in particular? Like either standardise everything or legalise everything. Perhaps people who feel more strongly about sports will come in with good arguments against it. To my mind, when people cheat and lie, often you can't prevent that, so you take away the motivation to cheat and lie. And if you can't remove the motivation, then you just incorporate it into the system. Somehow you make it transparent. And you do that just legalising everything. But then it's less about the person.
It's old news.
Well, I think we were both quite nervous about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed the way it's gone,
Yeah.
the way we've ended up. Like this is quite a philosophical question about what competition is for, and its role in national identity and entertainment industry and all the rest of it. Is just very multifaceted, and I think we've done well to talk for an hour without dying.
I think there's a good chance we're going to get stronger opinions about this than we've had from anything else.
Are you saying we've been a bit controversial?
A little bit.
I've been controversial.
But I just think that there's so many people we know that are into sport who have opinions. I can imagine some text messages from someone I know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are they going to be bad?
Yeah, because he's asked me about my opinions on this before and hasn't liked them.
Excellent.
Because a lot of people don't really have very strong opinions on stuff that's kind of more important, questionably. But will not hesitate to voice their opinions on the on sport.
That is true, yeah. More important, to which they have emotional investments.
Yeah.
That is the difference, isn't it? The things that we might value, we have emotional investment in. They are emotionally attached to.
Yeah, whereas we don't have any emotional investment at all.
At all,
really.
yeah.
Except when the Olympics are on, or more specifically the Winter Olympics. I shocked everybody at work by saying, I quite like watching the Winter Olympics because there's significantly more chance of serious injury. The responses I got, there was one lad at the far end of the office chuckling away to himself. Everyone else was horrified at how disgusting I was.
But it's true. There's a car crash element to sports.
Yeah.
That it's kind of fundamentally part of the show. Right? It's the gladiatorial thing. Okay, we don't spill blood quite so much or put people to the sword. But yeah, I can understand that. Well, News Podcast, as always, would like to extend its thanks to bensound.com for them supplying royalty-free music, and also to Mr. Peter Kitson for the use of his voice.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Goodbye.